Hey, how's everybody doing today? Welcome back to the New York Cross Harbor, and today we're going to be doing some work on a key scene here on the corner of 41st Street and 2nd Avenue in Sunset Park. And in this scene that we're going to be working on today, it's a classic, iconic scene from the New York Cross Harbor. You've probably seen it. It is where these two tracks cross under the corner of a building, and the building is kind of supported by a couple of pillars, and I'll put the image up on the screen for you if I can find it. Well, I know I could find it, I just don't know if it's copyright or not. But anyway, this is a very iconic scene here on the Cross Harbor, so of course we have to recreate it, and boy, am I happy with how this turned out. You guys are going to really enjoy some of the techniques that you see here. The first thing that I was trying to do was use some of these SAM bridges as bridge supports, and I was going to put the building on top of the bridge. That ended up not working because the pillars didn't line up the way that I wanted, and I also couldn't get this building to fit the way that I wanted. So I found these concrete pillars, and if you want, rewind a little tiny bit, you'll see that I stacked them on top of each other, and I'm going to use that as the support for my building here. And, you know, it's really difficult to find buildings that exactly match what you see in this part of Brooklyn. So the best that I could do, obviously, is just find the closest representation that I can, and some of these EET buildings and a few of these other industrial buildings that I have installed work really, really well. And you know, the name of the game here is impressionism, right? I'm not able to recreate this perfectly. I'm not, you know, some big game studio. I'm not Microsoft Trainz Simulator or something like that, or Dovetail. I'm just a guy trying to recreate this as best as I can and make it feel like Brooklyn, and I think I did a really good job with this. I'm really, really happy with how this turns out. You'll see as it develops here. And especially if you're familiar with this area, if you've ever been to Sunset Park in Brooklyn and just walked around where the tracks are still on the road and stuff like that here, you're gonna recognize this immediately. It's almost uncanny. It's crazy. So anyway, I used a couple different buildings here. You know, what I've been doing a lot lately is kit bashing. And that's been my favorite way to achieve the look for things that I want, and to just kind of have more of a unique look to my maps. You know, everybody has a different way of building. Some people just want to place down some buildings there and they want to run trains. They don't care what the buildings look like, they just need some sort of structure there. For me, I want it to look as best and as close to the real thing as possible, and that's what I really love about modeling personally. You know, when it comes to N scale or virtual scale, I want to recreate things as close as possible. I've often joked when I was doing the WKNS that I wanted every blade of grass to be exactly modeled. I don't get that, you know, I don't get that in the weeds, so to speak, with things, but, you know, certain things like where these signs are, the street signs, the street lights, and things like that, that's easy to go into Google Street View and pretty much just place them almost exactly where they actually are. And if you do that, you'll get a really good representation of the area. And I got really lucky also with the buildings here. These large buildings in the foreground here, like, look really, really identical to the ones that are in the Bush Terminal, Sunset Park area on the real life Cross Harbor. And I've been trying to use those as much as possible. They have a little bit of a weird shape to them, so I've been kit bashing them and clipping them together to get the look that I want. But they are like uncannily close to some of these big warehouses that dominate the skyline down there. I have some pictures. Maybe I'll try to put them in the video here after I record this voiceover. I have some pictures from the area that I can post or put into this video, not post, so you guys can see a little bit of a comparison of what the real life location looks like compared to what some of these buildings look like. I mean, just go on to Google Earth and look around, because that's basically what I'm doing. But, you know, the main takeaway with a lot of this, and I said this in the last episode, is these big conglomerations of buildings. I have to reuse a lot of these assets multiple times because there's only so many like good-looking warehouses in this game, and there's only so many that really fit the bill for this location. So it's involving, I have to do a lot of kit bashing. I have to mix and match and move things around so that that the buildings like look appropriate, and it doesn't look like there's some some kind of a pattern there. That's my biggest fear, is they're doing too much copy and pasting and accidentally creating a pattern of buildings or something like that. But it's bound to happen at some point. If you spend enough time looking at this map, you're going to see things that repeat. But you just have to kind of live with that. We only have, I think I'm using maybe 50 different warehouse assets through this whole area. But I mean, really, the devil is in the details with this area, and you can see the cobblestone street there. You could see him putting down some street signs and these crosswalks. I ended up making my own out of the stop lines, the FG stop lines, because the Epcot spline that I was using doesn't conform to the terrain properly. So I just traced over it with some stop line, the FG stop lines, and made my own, and it's, use the scrapbook tool, it works great. But as I was saying, the devil is in the details. This area of Brooklyn is an industrial wasteland. I can't stress that enough. The roads are in awful shape. There's patches of cobblestone like I'm doing here where it sort of spills out into areas that were paved over. There's potholes, there's you name it. This is like a treacherous area to drive around. So I'm trying to recreate that as best as I can with the HD terrain. That allows me to do these really small textures. I can almost do like one brick at a time by making the radius 0.5 meters there. And I'm also using these I forgot what they're called, road damage or something like that, pavement damage by the Few or the Fue on the DLS, THEFUE. If you look him up, he's got some really great stuff on there. Road damage assets and cracks and all sorts of stuff that I'm going to be making a lot of use of here. So now on this corner, this is another iconic scene that is really almost impossible to replicate here in Trainz, but I think I did a pretty good job. The building is pretty similar. It's about a 2 or 3 story brick structure that's got a similar sort of paint scheme to it. But the real takeaway with this scene on the corner is that the tracks actually in real life pass so close to that building that there's actually chips missing out of the corner of the building from boxcars clipping the building because the tracks were just that close. So it has this sort of like cutout on the side of it to sort of conform with the bend of the tracks and stuff like that, but the tracks just run so close to that building that damage was bound to happen. And there's a DVD floating around out there, I own it, of the Cross Harbor. It's the only footage that I know of the Cross Harbor, and you can actually see a train coming around this corner and just narrowly missing clipping that building. But of course, I had to try to model that because that is another iconic scene in this area. This S-curve, I guess this entire S-curve in this sort of alleyway here. This is 41st Street. This is a two-way road. There's cars parked on here, there's traffic on here, and it's a very active road. Unfortunately, the track is out of service now. It's not being used anymore. But it is still there. It's still sticking out of the pavement. I think in some areas it's paved over at this point, but yeah, it's quite the area. Oh, back to what I was going to say earlier about the road being in really bad shape. I used to, at one of my old jobs, I used to park one of our trucks. I used to drive a 24-foot box truck, and we parked it in the area that used to be the South Brooklyn Railroad's yard. And so I used to drive through here all the time in a big box truck, and man, you hit some of these potholes and then like all of that cobblestone or the brick pavement and all that kind of thing, and the truck would just be bouncing around like a boat. It was really uncomfortable to try to drive through there. Even at like 2 miles an hour, you would just be bouncing all over the place. Absolutely ridiculous. And what's even crazier is that I wasn't the only guy down there driving trucks. This whole area is full of trucks. There's a lot of automotive places down here. There's like truck repair shops, there's truck parking, there's like a garbage processing facility down here. So there's a lot of trucking in this area, which is probably why the roads are in such bad shape. You get all this heavy traffic just driving over this 100-plus-year-old cobblestone road. It's just gonna tear it up. But anyway, I think I did a pretty good job recreating that with some of these asphalt or pavement damaged assets. And you'll see in a few moments too that I do a little bit more texturing in the next area that I'm going to work on. And it's kind of amazing what you can accomplish with HD texturing with just a couple of textures now. So obviously everybody, you know, on the top of everybody's mind is this 16 texture limit with HD terrain. Oh no, it's the boogeyman, you know, 16 textures. I don't think it's that big of a deal. You know, it's kind of a pain if you're updating an old route that has tons of textures on it. But when you're starting with a new route with no textures on it and you can pick which textures you want to use, as long as you're really conscious about it, it shouldn't be any issue. I haven't run into any issues yet, but I am really taking my time deciding what textures I want to use. Obviously, I always use the city street or the city textures by S. Myers. Those are my favorite textures to work with, so I use a lot of those. And just using the right combination of textures with some assets and stuff like that, you'll get like a really good look with just a handful of assets used. So I just wanted to mention that you don't have to use, you know, 20 different dirt textures in one area to get a really good look, or 20 different pavement textures. As long as you just blend them well and take a little bit of time and use the HD tools where you can texture down at 1 meter like I'm doing here, you can get a really good effect with a very, you know, limited texture palette. And you could also use the color shader tool. I haven't really made any use of that, to be perfectly honest. I totally see the functionality of it and the benefit of it, but I just haven't used it yet. I will eventually use it, but right now I'm pretty happy just using textures and using the really fine detail texturing brush radius that you can use now. And especially for an area like this where there's these areas that are just partially paved over and partially cobblestone, and it's just an absolute mess. But these assets, these road damaged assets, are really fun to work with. The PBR textures kind of like clip through them in a really interesting way, so you kind of get some of these spots that really look like road damage. The problem here is I'm trying to create like a paved like a paved repaired section here, but the PBR cobblestone texture is peeking through. So I had to go underneath and sort of smooth it out with just a regular basic asphalt texture. Not a huge deal. I don't mind that cobblestone peeking out here and there in certain areas, but it's, you know, some places it just doesn't really work. So here I'm adding some manhole covers and then these road repair plates right there, which are all over the place in Brooklyn. And I'm using some pond scum here too along the side of the roads to just add a little bit more griminess to the area. Another big key feature, a notable feature of just New York City in general, is the scaffolding everywhere. And if you ever go into the city, you'll see scaffolding all over the place. So I wanted to include that on this building here. And I'm trying to add some of this damage to the sidewalk as well. It's a little bit more of a challenge to put it onto the sidewalk, but you could still do it if you just take some time. So now the last section that we're going to work on here is this, the inside of this warehouse area here. I believe this was an industry called Yipan or Yipin. It was some kind of a warehouse that they produced the Chinese food like soy sauce packets and duck sauce and hot mustards, like all those little packets that you get in you know, when you get takeout. I believe that was this industry, at least like in the 80s and 90s. I could be completely wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what this was. I know in the 1930s and 40s, this was like a big rail yard. There were many tracks through here. I have absolutely no idea what its use was back then, but that's why it's such a large open space. In the 90s and 2000s, there was only one track kind of coming into here. I did get lucky once before this industry went out of service in probably 2007. I got to watch the Cross Harbor actually switch some cars in here. And man, that track was in such bad shape. I don't know how the train did not derail. It was all buckled and the rails were just sticking straight up. It was ridiculous. Unfortunately, those are the days before the iPhone, or at least before I had an iPhone, so I don't have any video of it. But anyway, so this area, I wanted to try to break it up a little bit. I'm looking at Google Earth while I'm doing this. And, you know, this is where things kind of get a little bit blurred in terms of like what era I'm modeling here, because I'm trying to model like the 1980s, 1990s, at least as far as the activity level of the railroad here. But I don't have photos or, you know, Google satellite view from the 1980s or even most of the 1990s. I can really only look at what it looks like today. So I've been using Google Earth, and I've been using, the aerials one, historic aerials, and sort of just comparing notes. And what I found is that a lot of this area hasn't really changed too much since the 1980s, at least in some of the documents that I've seen. So it's not that big of a deal that I'm modeling more off of Google Earth than I am off of historical imagery, because it is still similar. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm using the modern Google Earth more than anything historic, just to have something to look at, plus my own knowledge from taking trips here and taking pictures and stuff like that. So, you know, it's sort of just blurring the lines between modern day and the 2000s and the 1990s and the 1980s. But you know what? I'm okay with that. It doesn't, you know, it looks cool. It's going to be a fun route to operate on, and if nothing else, it's going to just look great. And that's what I'm really excited about, because it's looking really good right here. I mean, for somebody like me who spent a lot of time in this area walking around and working down here and, you know, just exploring, taking pictures and whatever else, it's very recognizable to me. And I'm pretty proud of that so far. I just hope that I can keep that up for the remainder of the build, because there's still a decent amount of this to go, and you know, fully capturing the busyness and the freneticness of New York City and Brooklyn in this game, you know, is a real challenge. Like, I could probably spend a lifetime detailing and putting all the scenes and everything in here to try to match it to real life. But, you know, I don't want to take that long. I want to release this route by the end of this year or early next year. So I have to sort of decide what I'm going to model and what I'm not going to model. But yeah, I think this is the last clip here, so I'm going to end my thoughts here. I'll leave you guys with the last few minutes here, and then there's some cinematics at the end for you guys to enjoy. So I hope you guys are enjoying this build series as much as I am. I'm hoping to get maybe some more videos out. I always say that, but you know, time is whatever. Time is tough to come by, and I always get more ambitious about doing these things than I can actually handle. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Enjoy the last few minutes of this clip and then the cinematics that are coming up. If you guys liked it, obviously, please leave me a like. Leave me a comment down below if you've ever been to Sunset Park in Brooklyn and you've seen the Cross Harbor in real life, and let me know. I'll see you guys in the next one.